Good evening and welcome. My name is Liz Vallee. I am with the People's Party of Canada, representing Chatham-Kent-Leamington, and you are watching the People's Forum. The People's Forum is a platform for the people. We give the people an opportunity to share their stories and share their experiences and let their voices be heard. So tonight we are going to be focusing on media biases, media censorship, and tonight we will have Rick Walker join us. Welcome, Rick.
Good evening, Liz, and thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. Okay, so let's start with, what do you do for a living?
Well, I have my own media company, and I guess the biggest part of that is that I practice automotive journalism these days, mainly. So I test drive cars. I have my own television show, the SST Car Show, which is seen mainly in the United States, and in Canada, it's rebroadcast into Canada from WKBW television out of Buffalo. So it's seen largely in the Toronto GTA area, and it's picked up on satellite and cable across Canada. So that's mainly what I do. I also do some online marketing work, some television commercial work. I work in the media, but I guess the bulk of my experience has always been in news. For over 25 years, I worked for CTV News and for Chum Broadcasting until Bell Media bought them out. So I have a long background in journalism. Media is all I've ever really done. And that's really sort of my background. If you want to know how old I am, when I was a kid, I started shooting Super 8mm film.
Oh.
Because when I was like 8 years old, I was bugging my parents. I said, I have to have a movie camera. So they bought me a used Yashica Super 8mm film camera. And I used to save up my allowance and wash cars and cut grass and sell worms to fishermen to save up enough money to buy 4.5-minute film cartridges for that camera. And then I made movies. Like, they were very cinematic and very Hollywood.
Amazing. So would you say that, I mean, I remember what media was like when I was a kid and watching the news and stuff like that. Would you say there's a huge contrast between what we used to see back then and what we see now?
Oh, like night and day. What is going on today is nothing like it was back then. When I was young, we had, like, when I was a little kid, we had, I think, 3 channels on television. Right.
Yep.
Black and white TV, 3 channels.
And you had to walk up to the TV and turn the knob to change the channel.
That was our exercise.
Right. The kids were the channel changer. I was the channel changer.
That's right. So, and as Marshall McLuhan says, the medium is the message. And there's a lot to that, I think. And it's not, the message has changed because the medium has changed so much, and the volume of information we're exposed to has changed so much. And everything is different. And now everyone is a content creator online. And many, they're citizen journalists, and that affects the news business. And it's having a profound and dramatic impact on the current federal election, of which you are a big part of because you're running as a candidate in Chatham-Kent-Leamington. And it's a whole different ballgame.
So since you brought that up, according to Blacklock, the Trudeau government has given $61 million of taxpayers' money to publishers ahead of the election. How do you see this influencing the type of news that we see now?
Just watch it. Do you really think that it's unbiased? I guess, to someone who has worked in media as long as I have, I watch it differently. And in fact, when I was in journalism school, my professors would tell me, once you go through this program, once you start to practice journalism, you will never watch television or listen to the radio or read a newspaper the same way again. And it's true. Because when you're in the business, you see the other side. It gives you a totally different perspective, and you can start to read between the lines. And you can tell. I can tell when I'm watching. I think I can. When I'm watching, say, a television news story or a video online, I can see the bias or the attempts to be impartial. It's the choice of words. And when I see a headline that says people are calling for vaccine passports, it's maybe, but who? And these headlines, that the way they choose their words, they do slant stories these days. It's there's just a lot of bias. What you're seeing today is not the kind of journalism that I used to practice, which was try to remain as unbiased as possible, give people a platform from all sides of the story to present their case, let the public decide. Everyone has their own worldview, and you always bring that to any story that you're covering. But if you were a general assignment reporter, as I was for most of my career, you try to set that aside. You try to set your bias aside, and you try to be as fair as you can, knowing that no matter what you do, there's always some bias because you come at it with a bias. I see the world the way I see the world. You're 2 feet away from me, and you're seeing something from a little bit different perspective, right? Doesn't matter. Whoever you are, you're going to see things just a little bit different because you're not standing in the exact same place I am. But you always try to remove yourself from it. At least I always did. And that served me well because I was able to really walk in and interview anyone from any political party, from a union to the CEO of a big corporation. I never really went in with an agenda. It was my job not to. But today, I would argue that that's not the case in most cases. There is an agenda, and you have to put on you just have to scrutinize and take a lot of it with a grain of salt. You need to be skeptical about what you are watching, reading, hearing, being fed.
So when so you said that you actually worked for CTV years ago, and you worked for them for quite some time. When you moved on from CTV, did you have a reason to leave, or were you just moving on with your life?
There were a lot of reasons. Honestly, I saw the changes coming. Well, they weren't coming, they were happening. I always worked in news bureaus, mostly. For some years, I worked in newsrooms, but I was sort of mostly removed from the day-to-day politics of the newsroom operation. I was always calling in to participate in editorial meetings. I was always in the field. I did a little bit of anchoring, not very much. I did it a few times. But I was the guy on the street going and actually getting the story. I was an investigative journalist, or I was a general assignment reporter, or I was the guy going to a political event. I was the guy out shooting stuff, reporting stuff. Sometimes I was just, a lot of time I was a reporter. Sometimes I was a video journalist. So why did I leave? Because there was a shift happening, and I was finding it increasingly difficult to function as a reporter who was trying to remain unbiased about everything, because the editorial, it wasn't just what was being covered, it was what wasn't being covered, what they would choose not to cover. And it's a very complex thing, but just over time, I became increasingly uncomfortable with what I was being asked to do. And I just didn't fit in as an old school journalist that way. In fact, I ran into a friend of mine who I worked with for years at CTV, and he was a little bit older than me. And we had a chat about this, and he said, he doesn't miss being there anymore because of the way the business is now. It isn't just go out, be unbiased, and try to be as impartial as you can. Now there is an agenda, and I saw it happening with a lot of the new people coming in behind me. I remember a young woman who had just come in from journalism school. She just started to work there, full of fire and energy. And she said that the reason she wanted to be there was because she wanted to change things. Well, that's not why I got into journalism. I got into journalism because I wanted to preserve freedom of speech, freedom of access. I wanted to make a better country because I knew that journalism was a cornerstone of democracy. But I wasn't there to, say, push a particular political agenda beyond that.
Oh, yeah.
Right. But today people get in, and I mean, and I could talk to you about what's going on in journalism schools today, and it starts right there, and in my opinion.
Okay. So what is happening now in journalism school?
Well, I had a student come here to where I live about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. And this is just one example. And she was going through the same program that I went through. And I started to talk to her about the courses that they take. And I found out from her that she's not studying political science. There's no economics course anymore. As examples, right? Which for me were extremely important. In fact, not only did I study economics as part of my journalism program, I studied economics at the University of Western Ontario as well, separately, because I felt it was so important to have those tools available to me through that kind of reading and knowledge and education, right? If you're going to cover politics and economic issues, I wanted that grounding. But they don't teach that stuff. But they do teach environmental journalism.
What's that mean?
Well, to me, if you're going to cover an environmental story, that could be a beat. That could be like, just like the cop beat, right? You can cover cops.
Yeah.
But the fundamentals that you apply to covering police are kind of the same as they would be if you're covering an environmental story, a story about the environment. So if they have a whole course that focuses just on environmental journalism, then they're really kind of coming at it from a certain kind of bias. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they're making it like, okay, maybe you agree with what the climate change people, or maybe you don't. But if I, as a journalist, know that some people agree and some people don't. So if I'm going to do a story, I would talk to the people who think it's real, and I might talk to somebody who thinks that it maybe isn't what the other people think, to get the opposing point of view, to create balance and let people make their own decision based on the information that everyone provides. But if you start right in journalism school with an environmental journalism program, making drawing a conclusion immediately that it is a thing, and then telling students, I think, that you probably shouldn't talk to the people on the other side, or that they're not worth talking to because we've already told you that it's a real thing, and you're taking a whole course in it because it's a real thing. So why would you bother to talk to the other people? it creates a bias immediately before they even start to learn about anything, because the entire subject is framed in a particular way by the course itself. Instant bias.
Right.
So how do you then produce an impartial journalist who's going to go out into the field and practice impartial journalism and realize what they're doing?
So if we compare that to kind of today, what's going on, in our world right now, it's kind of like when we see the headlines about, let's say the lockdowns, and say when the lockdowns were full on, when we were fully locked down, but there were protests going on. Mm-hmm. So instead of covering the fact that there was a protest going on against the lockdowns and what the people were actually talking about and protesting about, the headline would say, anti-masker protest. So is that kind of comparable to what you're just talking about now?
That's partly a result of all of that.
Yeah.
From, the way the training is conducted, the education is conducted in the J schools now.
Right. So instead, it's like the feeling that I get when I'm reading headlines or even getting into the articles themselves is that their mind was made up before they even went in to cover that story, because sometimes those stories that they're covering is something that I've either been a part of the experience, or I know people who were there, or whatever, right? I know, a different side of the story, and I start reading it and I'm like, oh, they didn't actually ask anybody about this. They had their mind made up before they even went in to talk to anybody. So, wow. So that's happening.
I haven't practiced that kind of journalism since, talking about lockdowns. So I haven't been in any of the meetings, but I have a pretty good idea of what they're saying in those editorial meetings in the mornings. And I think I think the mentality would be for the local reporters, what they're being told is, your medical officer of health says this, and all these other health officials say this, and all these officials say this, and we're trying to keep people safe. So the responsible thing to do is to only report that, because if you talk to those other people, and that's not the official recommendation, those people are dangerous, and it would be irresponsible of us to put them on the air, right? Because their point of view could kill someone. The unfortunate part of that is that sometimes the officials are not always right. And when you create that, when you create an environment like that, you're not holding politicians or public bureaucrats, public health officials accountable. Because then if they're making a mistake, or if they get power hungry and they abuse their power, who's going to hold them accountable? The only people who do that are the journalists. And if they've been told, oh, no, it would be irresponsible for you to question your medical officer of health, he's an expert. Well, maybe. But just because someone is an expert doesn't mean that they're not influenced by coercion of their, for coming to them because of potential loss of job, or because of bribes or corruption or stupidity, incompetence. It could be a variety of things, so that maybe they're giving people bad advice. It's up to journalists to question people in authority. That's their job. Today, I don't think that's happening very often. And I think that's dangerous, because I think we've seen that cost lives.
Definitely. So
look at what happened. Look at what happened in New York with the nursing homes and Cuomo. The guy put COVID-infected people into nursing homes when he had facilities off-site where he could have put them instead. But he ordered them to be placed in nursing homes with the most vulnerable people and killed a lot of the elderly in doing so. And at the time, the media treated him like he was a saint and didn't question anything he was doing. And even now, you don't hear too much about it.
No.
They didn't do their job, and that cost people their lives. So I say, always question authority. Always. That's your darn job. Get to it.
Yep. So what do you think? What do you think is going on? Because it sounds like they maybe have a specific agenda, or do you think that they're just exploiting certain narratives to get more views? What do you think is going on there? Why do you think there's such a bad bias going on?
I think it's so many different things. It's the development of the internet. It's fragmentation of audience. It's the volume of material being produced. So broadcasting, media companies, newspapers, they've all been trying to find new ways to survive and monetize what they do. And when they've failed, government has stepped in, especially in Canada, and they've bailed them out with a lot of money. And when you have even the private broadcasting company like CTV or the private newspapers being bailed out with government money, they're no longer private, and they're no longer, I don't think they're able to function impartially because there's too much influence there. So they end up doing the government's bidding. And if the government's involved in something,
we know how that goes.
Then and they're not being questioned or held accountable because the journalists or maybe their bosses, the people, say the shareholders or the executives at a particular broadcasting company, don't want to lose those government grants. Are you going to question the prime minister, knowing that your next big check is just around the corner?
So how much is it that CBC gets a year from the Trudeau government? Well, from our government.
Oh my God. I'd have to look it up.
I think I read it's 2.1 billion a year or 2.4 billion a year.
It's a lot of money.
Or no, sorry. I'm getting that mixed up. 1.2 billion.
Is it 1.2 billion? Let's look it up, shall we?
Yeah. But I think because I messed it up a little bit because they get that per year. They get the 1.2 billion per year, but because of COVID, they got something like 500 or 600 million just in COVID relief as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd need to research it. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I've seen that before. I've seen the figures before. I've looked it up because I've gotten in arguments with people about CBC, and I just don't understand. If this broadcasting company is so great, then why can't they flourish like other media outlets that get zero government funding? There's media outlets out there that get zero government funding and they're flourishing. They're doing fantastic. They're growing all the time. And it all comes from their viewers. It all comes from advertising, and their viewers, help them with donations or whatever. So I don't understand how, because the other part of that was when I was reading about the CBC, they're claiming that they're they're in debt or whatever, like they're still losing money. They're still not making a profit.
Yeah, the CBC, and I understand this, right? They have always been the national broadcaster. And so they've always argued that they need government money because not everything they do is going to be for profit. And so some of the program, a lot of the programming they might do is done in ways that isn't done because it's profitable. It's because they're trying to provide service to, say, people in remote areas of the country, because Canada is so broad, so spread out. So they have a lot of, their mandate is such that it's not just profit driven. And it's also about their culture issues and trying to defend, well, back a few decades ago, it was about preserving Canadian culture, and when it's being threatened by the huge American U.S. broadcasting giants with all the programming they produce, right? So you need the CBC to protect Canadian culture. Although now our prime minister, I guess, says that we really have no Canadian culture, and we don't really have a country, and there is no Canadian identity, and we're a post-national state. So I guess we don't even have Canada anymore. So I don't know why we need the CBC if we're not trying to preserve a culture that doesn't exist, but they still get the money anyway. And don't get me wrong. I mean, some of the stuff they do is good, and some of the stuff I don't care for. And I have some friends who work there, and right now they probably don't like me very much. Is what I'm saying. But always when I was, but they would waste money too, because they were like a government entity. And when I was working on the private side of broadcasting, I would show up with a camera, me, and a microphone, and giant video recorder or whatever back in the day, and all the equipment. And they would show up with a reporter and a camera guy and a sound guy and a producer. Right. And then they'd send CBC radio English, CBC radio French. So you'd have like 6, 7, 8 CBC people to cover a story, and I'd be me with a camera. Got duct tape on it and some chewing gum. Yeah. And then I'd have to go back and file my TV story and go into the radio booth and do the radio version too.
So what we're seeing right now is just a lot of fear. People like you and I, we see that. I can't even watch like a regular newscast anymore. I can't do it because it brings anxiety up. Like, no matter what, and you could be in the greatest mood and all of a sudden the anxiety just shoots up. So what is up with that? What is going on in the media that they're pushing to scare people so much? And it's been going on since before COVID. Like, I noticed that, before even COVID started, but now that we have a pandemic, it is insane with fear. What is up with that?
I wish I really knew, but I agree with you. I see it. It's a narrative. Why? I'm not entirely sure, but man, they are scaring the crap out of people. I think back to the years and years that I worked in television, and honestly, I can tell you that in the news business, they love fear. Some of those assignment editors and news directors love fear. It jacks up the ratings. So if there's a big snowstorm coming, it's the biggest snowstorm ever. It's going to be Snowmageddon. Don't go out. You could die. And I remember one Snowmageddon in particular, where it was being like, they knew the storm was coming. It was going to be Snowmageddon. That was the headline everywhere. That was the word they were using. And it snowed a little bit. But that's what they do. And it has dramatic impacts on people's lives. And I think sometimes they would be irresponsible with it. It was something I always tried to resist, and it drove me nuts because I could see it and I didn't want to partake in it. Millennium Madness. Remember the year 2000?
Yes.
Planes were going to drop out of the sky.
Yep.
World's coming to an end on New Year's Eve.
Yep.
So I hope my old news director isn't watching, because he's not going to like what I'm going to tell you. So I was told to do a 5-part series on Millennium Madness. And I said, really? Are you sure that the world's coming to an end at like midnight on the weekend? They were like, oh, you gotta do. Everybody's talking about it. You gotta do the Millennium. You do Millennium Madness, and it's gonna be great. And I didn't really want to do it because I was very skeptical. I didn't think planes are going to fall out of the sky, but I went and did my job, and I talked to lots of people, and I tried to be impartial. And then I did the whole series, and we went around and we talked to a lot of experts. And it went to air, and we scared the crap out of people for 5 days leading up to New Year's Eve. And then the story went, then New Year's Eve came, and nobody died, at least not from the glitch in the computers, which was supposed to crash and burn the entire world. And then I got in trouble because my news director said that I had engaged in fear mongering.
What? You got in trouble?
Oh, yeah.
But you were told to do it.
Why? You see why I didn't want to do it?
What the heck?
Now, at the time, prior to New Year's Eve, what I was reporting was fair and balanced, because the experts were chiming in, and they were getting on TV, and they were getting a lot of attention and getting profile, and the TV station was selling ads. Everybody was worried. They were afeared.
Wow.
And then when it was all over with, my name was on it, which is why I didn't want to do it to begin with.
Right.
Which I pointed out, but still my name's on it.
Well, so you're the scapegoat.
So I'm responsible.
Yeah.
It was funny how that worked.
Wow. Wow.
I didn't lose my job or anything.
No,
right? But it's that was the reality of it. I was very uncomfortable doing it, and very uncomfortable afterward. And so that's the predicament you can be placed in.
So do you think that still goes on now? Like, or do you think they just kind of let it fly now?
What do you mean let it fly?
Well, because of how crazy things are. Like, the fear is just kind of everywhere, all over the news, right? And okay, so for example, with the vaccine passports, they announced that, right? And then today I saw an article that said the vaccination bookings have doubled. And now,
congratulations.
Yeah.
It worked.
Scared everybody into going, well, not everybody, but they scared double the amount of people into going and get the vaccine, because
fear is pretty powerful, isn't
right.
it?
So this is all.
But what are they afraid of? Are they afraid of the virus? Or are they afraid that the government's going to smack them down, or their employer's going to fire them?
Yeah, well, that's what it is. It's all people they're afraid to be fired.
Yeah, well, that's not right.
Well, that's who's left, right? Yeah. That's who's left to get vaccinated, are the people who have made a choice for themselves.
It's pretty gross.
And yeah, absolutely. So that's who's left. And I've had, I don't know how many messages come in today from people letting me know that their job has let them know that they have until a certain date to get that first one, and then a certain date to get the second one, or they will lose their job.
Well, isn't that nice?
So it all started, though, from the media. It all started there with this.
I wonder if the same experts who predicted the planes falling out of the sky back in 2000 are the ones that are predicting this. I don't know. It seems oddly familiar.
It does seem oddly familiar. So that's, yeah. Now,
but they're experts, so
right. So I kind of feel like it's a free, and I don't know. I'm not, and you probably wouldn't know either. We're not in the studios anymore. We're not, but it looks like the same reporters reporting this stuff all the time.
Yeah, you know who's not an expert? Doug Ford.
Right.
What did he do for a living before he became the premier?
Well,
Is he an expert?
No.
Who's questioning him?
But he says he gets all of his advice from the advisory table.
Right. Remember that whole thing I said about maybe you better start asking hard questions of the bureaucrats and what their motivation is, and whether is there coercion? Are they being influenced in some way? You might want to ask some questions, but maybe you better not, because if you start asking questions, someone might die.
Right. So, and that's what we're seeing now, right? We're seeing what the media will say, trust the science or trust the experts, trust, but that's, like you said, back when you were a journalist, that's not how you operated. You would have taken that side, that, the advisory table or whatever, but you also would have chatted with these doctors that are trying to come forward, these nurses that are trying to come forward.
I would have, definitely.
Epidemiologists, virologists, like there's all these people coming forward, but when that's happening now, there's no mainstream media listening to them. They're not taking that, like they're not even, because like you said, if they publish that side, well, that could be dangerous, right? So they're being dismissed. Like they'll say, no, they're crazy conspiracy theorists.
Or you're being told you can't listen to those other people. Those protesters are crazy.
Yes. Meanwhile,
don't talk to them.
No.
Don't give them any airtime.
No.
That would be irresponsible.
Yeah.
Don't talk to that doctor, because he's not, he's sharing misinformation.
I'm getting notes from my daughter. I feel like I'm in elementary school.
It must be pretty important if she's
she wants a cupcake.
She wants a cupcake.
That is very important.
And you see the difference in media today compared to the way it used to be?
Yes.
Yeah, you take your kids to work with you. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the experts are wrong.
No.
I'm saying we need to question.
Yes.
Everything.
Well, isn't that what science is?
And that's what journalism is.
Well, right? Yeah, journalism too.
And science is always evolving.
Yep.
Science has never settled.
And journalism either, I would assume.
Never.
No.
It's evolving, and styles evolve, not always for the better, as we're seeing right now. And bad journalism can cost lives.
Right.
I don't like what I see going on today. I'm very disturbed by it, honestly.
I feel, and you probably feel as well, I feel that the media is, it controls the message that goes out. It controls the culture that is out there. Look at us right now. Look, like every step of the way through this journey through COVID, I've been able to predict what's going to happen next based on what the media reports and the wording they've used. So I don't know if I have a little bit of the instinct that you have. You were saying that you look at journalism differently now because you've been in it. But for me, I can read between the lines and go, oh, wait a minute. Okay, so I can tell that this is going to happen next. So that's how I got here, was in the second lockdown. I could tell there was going to be a third one already.
Because what's going on today is I think, through some media outlets, and some of the ones at the very top. And you have to understand how media really works to really understand what's going on with this. But media is being used to prepare people for things that are coming, to condition people. I know that certain news outlets in the States, for instance, are tools of the CIA. Mainstream media outlets that people think are giving them truth. A lot of the information coming out of there is government manipulated CIA propaganda. There's no question about it. And that's gone on for a long time. But right now, today, it's at a whole new level. Do we ever really know what the heck's going on and what exactly is being done to us psychologically? I don't know. But I know it's happening. You think it's happening in Canada? It's happening all around the world.
Well, that makes sense to me because, again,
I want to point out something with that. Because it's happening at that level, see, news flows down.
Right.
So you have your top tier media outlets. You have your New York Times and your Washington Post and your National Post, your Toronto Star, right? You have those big papers. And you have your big CBC and the ones at the top. And then you have your news wire services, AP, Associated Press, Reuters. Those guys feed the local stations, the local radio stations, the local newspapers with their newswire services. They set the agenda. When they report on a story, that's what everybody follows. They set the news cycle and it flows down from there. So if they want to set something in motion, if you have government manipulation or, a lettered organization that wants to implant information through an operative or directly, they start there. And then because they have the credibility, it's reported all the way down. And the other news outlets at the regional and local levels take that information as gospel.
Right.
I can tell you, there was a time when I was like generating news stories, feeding directly to the wire service. And then the wire service would send it. I'd also report locally. But I would also feed to the National Wire Service. And I remember there were stories that the assignment editor was picking up like 2 days later that I had done, but he got it through the newswire. And then he would send it back to me and say, you have to do this story. And I would say, well, I already did that story. He says, no, you have to do this story because it's on the wire service. I said, I know, I did that story. He said, no, it's on the wire service. So you have to do this one because it's on the wire service now. I know, I'm the guy who generated the story to begin with.
Jeez.
It was kind of crazy. And he couldn't wrap his head around the fact that I had done the investigation, done the story, because my name wasn't on it anymore. It was like on the wire service. He couldn't understand it. It happened a bunch of times. So I hope I explained kind of what I'm talking about. It's just so if there's some piece of information, if they want to manipulate something, it starts at the top. And because it's at the top, nobody below it questions it.
No, they just run it.
Right. So if you're the assignment editor at any given news outlet and it's coming across the wire service, you feel comfortable with that information. You feel safe with it because there's strength in numbers. If you run with that and it's wrong, you're not going to get in trouble because it came from the wire service. So that's your excuse. And you feel like it's been vetted. You feel like it's been checked. So it must be factual. It must be okay. Which was bizarre because even when the reporter who generated the story told this guy that he was the guy who generated the story, he didn't think that I was the guy who generated the story. It couldn't possibly be because it came from the wire service and I was only at the regional level and I was just supposed to go do it again. Because whatever I had done couldn't have been right or not the same.
Because you're not the wire service.
Because I'm not the wire service. It doesn't matter. Move on.
No, it's kind of
Did that bake your brain?
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, yeah.
But not his fault. He was a nice guy, the assignment editor.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's just kind of looking at it on the inside. So really everything that we see. So let's say people rely on our local media here for stories.
Yeah.
They're getting it from the top and they don't question it. Just, yeah.
Well, see that what they'll do is they'll take a national story from the wire service and they might localize it. So what happens is they take that information, the base information, as being factual.
Right.
And even if they apply quotes and, in their mind and the treatment that it gets, it's like they're just going to regurgitate that information. And then when they go out to localize it, which is what local reporters do, they apply that information as fact and then insert and apply the local angle to it and get local reaction. But if they're telling you that so many people died of XYZ drug, then you just take that as being true. You generally don't go back and go to the original source and check that because it's from the wire service. So you assume it's been vetted and checked and must be therefore factual. So it gets repeated over and over and over and over again. So if somebody makes a mistake or if somebody just lies, if it's coming from the top and it flows down, it just gets repeated over and over and amplified over and over and over again. And it gets repeated so much that the general public believes the lie or the incorrect information. So if you're in the CIA or if you're with CSIS or local cop, I mean, anybody, right? You want to manipulate the public, just give it to the New York Times. Let them insert that information into a story, feed that out, and then it filters down all the way through the system until it gets to your local radio station and, the Chatham Voice or the London Free Press or any local paper. And if it's a lie, it's a lie, but it came from the wire service. So nobody's going to get in trouble.
Wow.
Get it?
Yeah.
And that will filter right down to your medical officer of health too, who relies on credible news sources like the New York Times for information. So if they want to lie and it comes from the New York Times and it filters down through those newspapers, which your medical officer of health may be reading online, or maybe he's picking it up out of the local paper. And if they see it in 100 papers, the source is it's maybe a single source, but it's reported in all these papers. So it generates this impression of credibility.
Yeah.
And in fact, the decisions being made may be improper. They could be making wrong decisions because somebody lied. That's why you have to question everything all the time, including your medical officer of health, especially your medical officer of health. Hello? Does it make sense?
Yeah.
And your mayor and your MP. And when you become the MP, we'll be questioning you.
Yeah.
And holding you accountable.
Should be questioning me already.
Darn right.
Yeah.
Ask the hard questions.
Yep. I'm looking to be the leader. I've said it before when I say things, don't just take my word for it. Go look. It's there. It's, you have to, yeah. And that's why, I don't just, I read mainstream media because I need to know what they're up to. But I also go to other sources to try to collect information. It's not just them, right? And it's not just, I've been criticized saying I only go on Facebook or I only listen to Rebel News or something like that. Well, no, because I don't trust anybody. I don't trust one source. I don't. I need to look around. I need to, where are the medical studies? Where are the medical websites? Where are the experts at? I try to look around because I don't trust one source. We've been lied to so many times at this point.
And I'm not saying that the New York Times lies all the time.
No.
But they do sometimes.
Right. So.
And actually maybe more than sometimes. I would say probably more than sometimes. The New York Times.
Yeah.
and other papers.
Or sometimes they manipulate a story or a truth somehow to fit something.
And it's the way things are written.
But I can see your point with going back to when you said
beware of stories that have descriptive terms.
And you say they prepare and condition us for what's coming. That makes complete sense, because that's how I've been able to see what's coming. And, you know, for example, when Doug Ford said, I'm not going to implement a vaccine passport. Yeah, you are. I knew that. Like, the moment those words came out of his mouth, I'm like, okay, well, how long do we have until he implements it? Because right, and when they repeat something enough times, it starts to desensitize you from that idea.
Oh, it's worse than that. Go back a year, go back a year and a half, go back 2 years. Tell people 2 years ago that the government might implement something like a vaccine passport, and I can tell you that you probably get 95 to 100% of people saying you're nuts.
Right.
And that's a terrible idea.
Right.
That'll never happen here.
Yeah.
And yet somehow we've gone from that to people apparently asking for it, wanting it, begging for it, needing it. How did that happen? Did that happen organically, or was there something more being done to people's brains?
We were conditioned to start to think it was okay, and not that we, you know, I know there are a lot of people out there that it's not okay. They're not happy with it.
How did it become okay to take away somebody's job because they don't want to undergo a medical procedure? When did that become okay? Yesterday? What kind of country has this become? And where are the journalists? Where's the bravery? It's your job to hold a light to this stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, but it would be irresponsible to question it.
And dangerous.
Dangerous.
Yes.
Indeed.
Because someone like me is dangerous. Someone like me is diseased and dangerous. And I shouldn't even sit beside somebody. I shouldn't even think that I have a right to sit beside somebody on a train and infect them with my disgusting dirtiness.
Well, the experts certainly seem to think that. So who am I to question that? Well, I was a journalist, but now I'm just an ordinary citizen practicing a different kind of journalism. I guess it's really not my job, so I just better stay in my place.
Well, I'll never stay in my place. Never.
I'm not comfortable with any of this.
No.
It's making me very. It's upsetting me.
Yeah.
You know, I know that. See, that's the other thing that we studied when I was in journalism school. It was a course called ethics.
Oh, ethics. Mm-hmm. You mean they used to teach that?
They did. They actually did.
Wow.
There was a whole course in it. I took that course. Yeah. I'm not sure what they teach now. I'd have to go ask somebody at the university and the colleges. I'm not sure, because I'm not sure I see it being applied in the field.
Yeah, it probably looks, I mean, there's probably something that would be kind of, I don't want to say parallel, but like it would just be different, I would think. Maybe not an ethics course, but just
look, I don't want anybody to get sick. And
no,
I'm not, nobody's sitting here saying COVID isn't real. That's not what we're saying.
No.
I'm saying we need to question the approach.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that some of the most vulnerable people out there are not being harmed by government. Because it's our job as journalists, or it's the job of journalists who are out there today, to hold government officials and politicians to account. And in that way, they are protecting the most vulnerable in society. because some of those people don't have a voice. Does a person who's being coerced into taking an injection, like maybe against their religion, or maybe because they're worried about side effects, and we don't know what that person's particular health situation is. When did Doug Ford become an expert to the degree that he gets to make a decision as to what somebody injects into their body? Think about it. Think about it, folks. Think about it, folks.
I was talking to somebody today, and they were in my kitchen with me, and just talking about the comparison of forcing somebody to put something into their body, right? And because, we can talk about, well, it's against someone's religion, or we can talk about they're worried about a side effect or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But really what it comes down to, it could be saline. And if I'm still not comfortable with saline going into my body, I just don't want it, then that's my body. I shouldn't have to have saline. So I had on my counter a hunk of raw beef, and I said, it's like me taking this raw beef and telling you have to eat it. Eat this. Eat it. You have to eat it.
Yep.
I don't care if you don't want to eat it. You have to eat it.
You must get a vasectomy, or you must get you must have your appendix removed. Everyone must. It's for the greater good.
It's for the greater good.
Yeah, we're all in it together. Everybody's got to get their appendix removed. What?
Yeah.
I mean, nobody wants COVID spreading around.
Nope.
But I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I think I know the difference between right and wrong. And
I don't care what these people say. I really don't care what these people say. The Doug Fords and all those people out there, they have no faith in the people. They think the people can't assess their own risks and make a judgment call. And it's absolutely disgusting. We're talking about a virus here. For someone my age, a survival rate of 99.99%, and I'm supposed to inject myself with something I don't want. I'm supposed to put a mask on my face for the rest of my life when I go out in public. I'm supposed to stay away from everybody, not hug anybody, just live like I'm in fear of this. And I'm not. I'm not careless. I still, if I think that there's a risk, I will take the precautions. And I did along the way. In the beginning of this thing, I was more careful than anybody I knew because of the situation I was in and my own lifestyle. I made choices before the government mandated them. I made choices without needing the government to tell me. And I know that there are intelligent people out there. And I know that people, when you're given, hey, this is the information, based on this information, these are your best safe practices. These are the best things that you can do to keep yourself safe right now. Mm-hmm. And if you tell people that and you let them know, you give them the information, most people are going to do it. In the beginning, most people did it. They were fine with it. But you cannot, when people have a 99.9% chance of surviving a virus, you cannot take away their rights. They have not proven significant harm or significant risk of harm. They've not been able to show it. Yet here we are. They're taking
Liz, I don't even care. I don't care what the situation is. I don't care how serious a pandemic is. I don't care if it's nuclear freaking war. The government shouldn't just shred the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
100%.
That's it.
That's it. That's it. Yet here we are.
Shouldn't happen.
No. Nope. And there's a lot of people out there that would that are calling us crazy and are calling us selfish and all of those things, but it's really not.
Actually, what I have found is that the people who are saying that are among the most selfish people I've ever met in my life. Because the people who are saying those kinds of things are generally people who are going to lose money or something if there's like another lockdown.
Right.
Right. And so now everything's kind of flipped. Right. So when we were seeing people yell, if you're out there protesting, no more lockdowns, that was sort of before the vaccines.
Yep.
But now the narrative is flipped. So now the narrative is, yeah, we don't want any more lockdowns. And we have to, so now you all have to get vaccinated so that I don't have to lock down. You have to get vaccinated because I don't want to lose any money. You have to get vaccinated because I want my business to stay open. You have to get vaccinated because this big factory where you work has to keep running, man. So inject yourself so that we can keep making the widgets so we can keep making profit. But I don't want to get injected. We don't care. You inject yourself because this factory has to keep running. We're all in it together. And you have to protect all the other people in the factory so that the factory can keep running. We want to keep making money. That's the truth. And we've seen it. I was at a thing with you a few weeks ago with a business owner who owns some property. It's a factory in the States. Goes back and forth over the border. And what did he say? I think people have too many rights. Everybody needs to get vaccinated. In fact, he was so enthusiastic. He'd had 2 shots of, I think it was the Moderna. And then he went out and got a triple because he got the Chinese one too. Woohoo! Good for you, buddy. Now, we don't know what's going to happen with that little vaccine cocktail you got going on, but I'm real happy for you. Hope it works out great. And I'm really glad that you're going to force all your employees to get the jab so that you can keep on making your bucks. But just remember, if you don't get it, you're the selfish one.
Yeah.
Right? So
yeah. So all of a sudden we're responsible for every single business, every single facility, every single, and sitting at 75. Go ahead. I got Mission Impossible over here, flipping over the bed, trying to ask me something. Yeah. So we've got about 80 to 85% with a single vax and about 76% double vaxxed, and that's not enough. And all our cases are skyrocketing. And how is this happening with that many people vaccinated? They were hoping and praying last year that we could get 55 to 65%, and if we did that, we could reach herd immunity.
Interesting. As a journalist over the years, covering a lot of stories from economics and politics to stories at the garbage dump, I've studied a lot of stats over the years, and I did learn how to read graphs. And I just can't figure out the numbers they're throwing at us these days, because when I go look at the raw numbers, what they're feeding us, well, as a journalist or someone with journalism in my blood, I want to ask a whole lot of questions because it just doesn't seem to make any darn sense. And how do you reach herd immunity when you have 80+% of the people vaxxed with a vaccine that you can still get infected with?
And still spread it.
And still spread. That's because you can't get to herd immunity when you have a vaccine that allows you to still be infected and to still spread it to both the vaxxed and the unvaxxed. So this is insanity.
It is insanity.
But everybody's got to do it. All the cool kids are. In fact, for a role model, just go look at that factory owner, because he got a triple, baby. He's a way ahead. He didn't wait for his booster. He went and got the Chinese one on top. Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you.
And we have too many rights.
Too many rights we have, apparently. Yeah. I fear for what's coming next, because the media is being used. The media is participating in in generating not just fear now, but anger.
Yes.
We've seen this in history before. The media is generating anger, and it's being directed at a specific group of people. And we all know who that group of people is. And when you get a mass hypnosis, psyop thing, whatever's going on in people's heads, where they feel justified in being anger, I see signs around this town that say, no room for hate here. I see a whole lot of hate right now, and it's coming from people I never thought I'd see it come from.
Yep, I know.
And it's directed at a certain group of people.
The unvaccinated, you can say it.
That they want to punish.
Yep.
Whether they're sick, whether they're infected or not, they just want them jabbed. And if they ain't jabbed, they want them punished. It is sick.
Yep.
Are you hearing me, folks? It's sick. What has happened to you all? Where are your heads? Where's your compassion? Where's my country? What has happened to Canada, and what has happened to journalism? I want my Canada back for everyone. Please. I'm begging everybody. Stop with the hate. Stop with the anger. Get your heads out of the internet. Get your heads out of the TV. Start thinking for yourselves. Start using a little common sense. Exercise a little compassion. Please. I'm begging you. Something's got to change. And all these politicians, we got to hold them accountable. It's time. My God. Do you know what's coming next? Does anyone see it? Because I do. And it's not pretty. It starts with a V, and it's not vaccine. And I pray every day that we don't get that far, but I know that it is that close, that close. Stop it. Stop. Just stop. God, I want to cry.
I know.
And I see what's going on in this election. It's not just what they're telling you, it's what they're not telling you. It's the censorship, suppression of different opinions. It's about preserving and expanding power. They're shutting people up and shutting people down because they're a threat to their power. That's what's going on in the media. So you get one side of the story. There is other information out there, and you can find it, but you have to go searching for it. And it's not all right. But if people are given enough information, if they have access to all the information, people have the brains, they're smart enough, they can figure stuff out. They can make decisions for themselves. They're adults. But if you don't give people all the information, or you're telling them and brainwashing them into not wanting to even look at other information because those people are crazy, then people don't make good decisions. And then you get this close to the next thing. I'm petrified. You want to know what's going on in journalism? It ain't journalism. Not anymore. Dark days. Dark, dark days. People have a choice coming up this month. You have a choice. More of the same, a lot more of it, or you can say stop. Had enough. I know what I'm doing.
All right. Well, that was very powerful, and I think that we can end it on that note. I don't think I can even touch that. So, yeah, thank you, man.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Rick. Okay, well, that ended on a very powerful note. I hope it's enough to reach some people out there and give them a little bit of a reality slap in the face. Because as Rick is saying, right now, it is the unvaccinated who are being attacked and being punished. For those who encourage this and applaud this, I'm sorry for you, because you need to look in the mirror and you need to look at yourself in the eyes. And you need to ask yourself if you like what you see. The other thing that you need to ask yourself is if you think you're immune to it. What makes you think that if the government can do something like they are right now to those who have chosen not to be vaccinated, what makes you think you're safe from that? What makes you think that you're safe from that same tyranny in the next crisis, the next emergency? I don't want that to happen to you. I don't want you to go through what I'm going through. That's part of why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I'm also fighting for our children and their future, because going down this path leaves them with no future. So I want to thank Rick again for coming on and shedding some light on media bias and censorship. And it got pretty deep there at the end. And those are hard things to say. It's hard to come out publicly and say those things, but it needs to be said. And you need to wake up. And you need to understand what is going on. We don't want that. We want people to thrive, and we want peace, and we want people to be free citizens. It's pretty basic. So thank you for tuning into the People's Forum. Again, the People's Forum is a place where we give the people a platform for their voices to be heard. Remember, when you go to the polls, advanced polls start September 10th. The election is September 20th. Vote Liz Vallee, PPC Strong and Free. Thank you and have a good night.